Chapter 6. Before the dawn breaks, it's dark and quiet out here. This is the backdrop as I meet Jack at the designated spot, the forest's edge. The stillness of the early morning at the facility stands in stark contrast to the grueling regimen that awaits us. As we begin our run through the forest, the darkness serves both as a cloak and a witness to our endeavor. The ground beneath our feet is uneven, the path winding between the trees like a sinuous challenge that unfolds before us. From the very start, Jack sets an unrelenting pace, a cadence so intense it causes me to stumble often. My feet tend to miss their grip on the forest floor, strewn with hidden roots and treacherous stones. Jack's expression is cold, his gaze fixed ahead, a silent force pulling me forward. My breath is ragged, my legs scream with effort to keep up. His persistence, his firmness in maintaining such a pace, forces me to tap into reserves of energy I didn't know I had. The forest is but a blur of shadows and fading night, the path winding and relentless beneath our feet. My chest heaves, the icy air sharp against my burning lungs. My legs scream in rebellion, unaccustomed to this relentless pace. Beside me, Jack moves with an effortless, unfazed stride, as if this grueling run is nothing more than a leisurely stroll for him. But for me, it's sheer torture. I reach my limit. Overcome with nausea, I lurch to a stop, my body collapsing against a tree for support. The first wave of sickness hits hard, a violent upheaval that leaves me struggling for breath. Ahead, Jack pauses, his back turned, silent and waiting. Once the ordeal passes, I straighten up and force my legs to move again, resuming the run with determined resolve. I refuse to give up. I don't step back for challenges. I step up. That's me? The path stretches endlessly before me, my vision blurring as I can barely keep my eyes focused. Time loses meaning as I push on, but eventually exhaustion and strain rack my body once more, forcing me down to the forest floor. I kneel, fighting to compose myself. Nearby, Jack stands like a shadow etched against the dawn's emerging light. He offers no help, no comfort, merely watches, probably anticipating my complaints. But I refuse to grant him that satisfaction. As I struggle to my feet, Jack resumes the run with the same punishing pace as before. There's no concession to my discomfort, no lowering of standards. It's a harsh lesson in the realities of the physical demands I must meet. My body screams in protest. The physical exertion, far beyond what I've ever experienced, pushes me to a brink I didn't know existed. My breath is ragged, my muscles burn with fatigue, and the taste of bile still lingers in my mouth from the earlier moments of weakness. He acts like he couldn't care less about how much I'm struggling. A mix of resentment and determination ignites in me. I have to keep up, I whisper to myself between labored breaths, each word a gasp for air. Stand, put one foot in front of the other. I can't give up. I won't give up. This mantra becomes my anchor, a lifeline in the midst of the physical torment. With each step, with each moment I refuse to succumb to the exhaustion, I feel a stubborn resolve growing within me. It's more than just a desire to meet the physical challenge. It's a defiance against Jack's implacable nature, against the notion that I might be just another trainee who couldn't make the cut. My hatred for his indifferent attitude fuels me, drives me to push past the pain and the exhaustion. As we finally come to the end of our run, the facility slowly coming to life in the early morning light, I'm spent but not defeated. My body may be pushed to its limits, but my spirit remains unyielded. Leaning heavily against the wall for support, I try to steady my breathing, the cool stone offering a small respite. Jack stands in front of me, observing with an unreadable expression. There's no sign of fatigue on him. Instead, he looks as composed as he did at the start of our run. I hate him. After a moment, he breaks the silence, his voice carrying the same unyielding tone as before. 5 p.m. computer room, he states, his gaze fixed on me. And after dinner, 9 p.m. fitness training facility. Be there. I'm so tired, but I get what he's asking. It's not just a physical challenge. It's a mental and emotional trial, a test of resilience and perseverance. I manage a nod in response, defiance burning in my eyes. Despite the overwhelming fatigue, there's a part of me that refuses to be daunted, a part that's spurred on by the challenge he represents. As Jack turns and walks away, leaving me to gather my strength, I realize it's going to be a relentless cycle of training, a constant push against my own boundaries. I push myself off the wall, my legs shaky but holding. The day ahead looms large, A day filled with more training, more challenges. But there's a newfound resolve within me. I may be at the beginning of this path, but I'm determined to walk it, to face each challenge head-on. The dining hall buzzes with life around me, yet all I can concentrate on is steadying my shaking hands while I balance my tray. Clara catches my eye and motions me over. Her smile quickly morphs into a look of concern as she takes in my appearance. "Eva, you've turned into a tomato. What's going on?" Clara inquires, her eyes wide with worry, as I collapse into the chair opposite her. I attempt a reassuring smile, but it's weak. "Just had my first training session with Jack," I say, trying to sound nonchalant. "You what?" Clara's eyes grow wide with disbelief. "With Jack? The one who barely speaks and gazes at everyone as if they're bothersome bugs? Why unearth him? Are you out of your mind?" Clara leans towards me, her voice fraught with anxiety. "Eva, he's known to be ruthless. It's a stupid idea, but what am I saying? You've gone completely mad." Her face is a portrait of distress, lines of worry etched like cracks in fragile porcelain. I can see she's scared, afraid for a friend who's going down a dangerous road. I'm so tired it feels like I'm wearing a heavy cloak. I try to shrug it off, but it's hard with all stress from what's happened lately. I need to improve, and fast. My voice is a mix of determination and self-mockery. I feel my resolve, but also the absurdity of my situation. I don't want to be seen as the easy target anymore, the weakest intern, and I know that's how I'm seen right now. I pause, my thoughts swirling in an effort to find the right words. "He's the best, Clara. There's no denying that. But this session was more intense than I had anticipated." The admission from my lips is a painful concession, an acknowledgement of the vast gap between my current abilities and where I need to be. Clara reaches her hand across the table, offering comforting warmth. She leans forward, her voice imbued with concern. "I saw him during combat training, Eva. His style, it's more like those of underground fights than anything we do here. He's unpredictable." Her words resonate deeply within me, reflecting my own thoughts. "I know. I have to take this risk," I acknowledge, feeling the full weight of this decision. She leans closer, her voice reduced to a confidential whisper. "Have you seen his hands, the fine scars on his knuckles? Those are the marks of someone who fights regularly without protective gloves." When she says this, a realization hits me. I've seen those lines, lighter than his usual skin tone, marking his knuckles, but I hadn't grasped their significance. In training, our protective gloves, even thin ones, are designed to prevent damaging our hands. Jack, on the other hand, seems to have fought in arenas where such protection is absent. "Just be careful around him, okay? He doesn't really operate like the rest of us," she adds. I nod, acknowledging her concern. "I understand. It's challenging, but maybe it's what I need to get better fast." Clara's expression softens, yet the worry doesn't leave her eyes. "Just remember, it's not only about being strong physically. You need to take care of yourself too." As we continue our breakfast, Clara shares her own experiences and challenges, providing a different perspective and much-needed empathy. It's a relief to step away from the pressure of training, even if just for a meal. As we sit across from each other, the clamor of the other trainees around us fades into the background. Clara, noticing my distant gaze, gently shifts our conversation to her own experiences, providing a welcome diversion from my tumultuous morning. "You know, I've been training for this kind of thing since I was a kid," Clara begins, her eyes reflecting a mix of nostalgia and pride. "My parents, they were both in the military. They started teaching me basic drills when I was just 8. I listen, intrigued. The contrast between our upbringings couldn't be starker. "Really? What was that like?" I ask, propping my chin on my hands. Clara's story unfolds further as she delves into more specific memories of her childhood training. "It was more than just drills and training routines," she clarifies. "My parents were firm believers in hands-on, real-life experiences. Every morning, rain or shine, we'd run together. They saw it as a means of building endurance in me. They would often say, 'Maybe one day you'll have to run from someone or something. You need to be strong and on a long distance.'" I picture a young Clara, keeping pace with her parents, her determination being shaped with each step. "And combat training?" I inquire, curious about the depth of her early exposure to such skills. "Oh yes," Clara responds, a glimmer of intensity in her eyes. They taught me basic combat techniques from a young age. It was all about self-defense, understanding your opponent, and being strategic with your moves. Her hands move animatedly as she speaks, underscoring her passion for the subject. But it wasn't all about fighting, she adds quickly. My parents believed in balance. We had our fair share of fun too. Hiking in the Alps was our form of a family boot camp. Those trips were challenging. They taught me about resilience, how to navigate tough terrains. The admiration in my eyes must be evident as I listen to her. Clara's upbringing was rigorous, yet it was filled with valuable lessons and bonding experiences. That sounds incredible, I say, genuinely impressed. It must have been an amazing way to grow up. Clara nods, a touch of nostalgia in her expression. It was. It gave me a foundation that I'm thankful for, especially now. And the best part, she continues, her smile returning, was the sense of accomplishment we felt as a family. Conquering a mountain together, you know? It brought us closer. As our conversation winds down, I find myself reflecting on Clara's experiences. Her childhood, steeped in adventure, seems to have perfectly prepared her for the life at the training facility. It's a contrast to my own path, but it's inspiring. It reminds me that there are many ways to build strength and resilience. As we gather our trays to leave, a thought crosses my mind, prompted by Clara's tales of hiking and outdoor adventures. I've always been confined to the urban landscape of Lugdunum, never venturing beyond its structured, patrolled environment. Clara, what's it like out there, in the countryside and the mountains? Beyond the city? I ask, my voice tinged with curiosity for the unknown. Clara pauses, a distant look in her eyes as if she's transporting herself back to those places. It's a different world, Eva. She starts, her voice full of wonder but also a hint serious. Out there it's wilder, less controlled. You feel a sense of freedom, but also the reality of being responsible for your own safety. Her gaze shifts to the window, overlooking the orderly expanse of the city. You know, the countryside wasn't always as it is now, she continues, her tone turning reflective. The wars left much of it in ruin. The contamination from chemical weapons and radioactive remains made large areas uninhabitable. I lean in, absorbing her words. This is a history that is often glossed over in our textbooks, mentioned in passing but never explored in depth. Glancing at the leftovers on my tray, memories of articles about food production flicker in my mind. And the farms, I question. Yes, they're vast, high-tech marvels, fully automated indoor farming systems. They're critical for our food supply, cultivating crops and growing meat from stem cells in entirely controlled environments. Each farm is completely encapsulated from the outside world to prevent any contamination of the produce with harmful chemicals. It's an impressive system of efficiency, designed to maximize yield while minimizing human labor, Clara explains. From the sky, you can see them easily, their artificial lights always on, isolated yet constantly active. Her description paints a picture of a world so different from the urban landscape we know. It's impressive, but there's a certain coldness to it, Clara adds, a hint of melancholy in her voice. Everything is so precise, so devoid of the natural chaos that comes with traditional farming from the old books. There's no soil, no sun, just rows of artificially lit compartments and machines. I try to envision these farms, so different from the quaint pastoral images that the word countryside used to conjure from old pictures in books. Well, it does help you appreciate what we have here in the city, the people, the bustle of human life and interaction, even if some of it can be challenging, Clara adds, her grin hinting at a shared understanding. I can't help but laugh in response. I find myself increasingly curious about Clara's unique experiences. You've been to these places, it's incredible, I wonder. Clara gives a nod. A few years ago, my mom was handling a security breach at one of those farms, she starts. I tagged along on her flights a couple of times. The areas between the city and the farms are too contaminated for ground travel. Flying over, we passed expanses of land, still bearing the scars of war. It really opens your eyes. Her description conjures a striking image in my mind, a bird's-eye view of a world where the past and the present intersect. What was it like seeing those areas from above? I ask, my interest sparked. It's a bizarre feeling, she replies. Beneath you, there's this barren expanse. But then, as you near the farms, everything changes. These places emerge like islands of life amidst the wasteland, vast hubs brimming with cutting-edge technology. And the mountains? I inquire, envisioning peaks untouched by human conflict. The mountains? Completely different story, Clara remarks, her tone turning softer. They escaped the war's destruction. As you fly toward them, the scene shifts from man-made landscapes to untouched nature. It's like traveling back in time to an era when the earth was unaltered. The mountains, they shrink you down, make you feel tiny, yet part of something vast. There's a tranquility there, so unlike the city. It's beautiful, but raw. You've got to be vigilant, ready for anything. The nights are dangerously cold, and the days bring searing sun. And the wildlife, bears, wolves, creatures untouched by our history, they're still out there. Clara smiles. It is. It teaches you respect for nature, for its challenges. You learn to coexist, to adapt. It's a valuable lesson, one that I think helps me even here, in the training. There are bears and wolves here too. She giggles. Clara's story shifts focus as she recalls their mountainous escapades. The mountains aren't entirely pristine. There are military outposts, she notes, a hint of past adventures sparkling in her eyes. These outposts are set up for long-range surveillance, she elaborates. They're there to monitor the airspace and European borders. The military uses them as part of their defense strategy, keeping watch from those high vantage points. I listen, fascinated by this glimpse into a world so. Did you ever visit these posts? I inquire, eager to hear more. Clara nods, a hint of pride in her voice. We did a few times. My parents have many connections in the military. We got the chance to spend the night at one of the posts. It's a completely different life up there, isolated. It must have been quite the experience, I comment. It was, Clara agrees. There's a tranquility, but also a solemn reminder of the responsibilities of those who protect our borders. Her words paint a picture of a world I've never known, one that exists just beyond the city limits. It's a reminder of experiences I have yet to explore. As we part ways, Clara's stories of the outside world linger in my mind. They open a window to possibilities and adventures I've never considered. The next segment of our training day brings us to a classroom where Lieutenant Vega is ready to deliver a lecture on strategic analysis. The room is filled with the focused energy of my fellow trainees, all ready to absorb the knowledge that Vega is renowned for. As she starts talking, her demeanor is stern, her words concise and pointed. She dives into the subject of the city's outskirts, the sector of Lugdunum that morphed into what's now called the underground following the wars. In our city, the wealth appears to taper off from the affluent city center, with its towering buildings and the bustling party district known as Sioux, to the more modest midtown. Here, middle-class residences mingle with the university, academy, and various popular shopping zones. The gradient then extends to the low town and outskirts, where the less affluent citizens and outcasts dwell among the ruins of crumbling, neglected buildings. Trainees, Lieutenant Vega begins, her voice carrying a stern warning. Today's discussion is crucial. It's about the underground community, the so-called outlaws or outcasts living in the periphery zones of city. She paces slowly in front of the room, her eyes scanning over us. You might hear stories, rumors about these people. Some may portray them as misunderstood, as merely seeking a different way of life. But do not be fooled by such narratives. There's a weight to her words, a gravity that holds the room in silence. These individuals have chosen to live outside our societal structures, outside the law. They reject the progress and stability that the Consortium has strived to build. And in doing so, they pose a potential threat to that very stability. She pauses, letting her words sink in. Some of you might encounter them, hear their alluring words. They may seem friendly, harmless even, but be vigilant. Their kindness is often a ruse, a tactic to draw you in. Her tone hardens. Do not underestimate the dangers they pose. Many in the underground are desperate, and desperation can lead to extreme actions. They have been known to be violent, even life-threatening in certain situations. Lieutenant Vega stops pacing and faces us directly. As future members of the police force aid, it is imperative that you understand this. Your safety and the safety of those you will protect depends on your ability to see through such deceptions and to respond appropriately. She walks over to the holographic display at the front of the class. With a gesture, the display comes to life, showing images of the outskirts, a stark contrast between the deteriorating edges of the city and the untamed lands beyond. These areas, she continues, pointing to the images, are where the city's regulations fade and the outcasts' influence grows. They live in a world parallel to ours, hidden yet intertwined with our own. They use abandoned infrastructures, makeshift shelters, and have their own rules and leaders. In my mind's eye, I trace the paths I've walked, venturing towards the city's outer rim. The city center, with its gleaming towers and streamlined architecture, gradually gives way to a different world. Here, buildings wear the passage of time like a second skin. Their paint peels and facades crack, each flaw telling a silent story. I remember the streets, less tended than those in the heart of the city, whispering secrets of lives lived in the shadows of prosperity. The ever-watchful surveillance cameras that stand sentinel in the city center grow sparse, their imposing gaze replaced by an air of quiet resilience, or perhaps a subtle defiance. As I ventured closer to the outskirts, the demarcation between the city's dwellers and the mysterious outcasts began to blur. The people here moved to a different rhythm, their gazes holding depths of stories untold, paths uncharted. Faces I passed didn't fit into the neat categories of my sheltered existence. I recall a group of children, their laughter echoing in a narrow alley, free from the stringent rules that governed my every action. Were they merely children on the edge of our world, or did they belong to the elusive realm of the outcasts? Each foray into these streets felt like a dance on the precipice of two worlds, each step drawing me further from the known and closer to the enigmatic unknown. Vega's serious talk about the risks of hanging out with those underground folks kept echoing in my head. It's a stark contrast to the curiosity that tugged at my heart. Left with more questions than answers, I wondered about the true nature of the outcasts. What stories did they carry in their silence? What truths lay hidden in their clandestine existence? Lieutenant Vega's voice pulls me back from the labyrinth of my memories. She stands resolute, a figure embodying the discipline of the Consortium. Your encounters with them may challenge your beliefs, may make you question the very fabric of our society, she says, her gaze sweeping across the classroom, capturing each of us in her earnest appeal. But remember, Lieutenant Vega continues, her tone imbued with a firm resolve, our role is to uphold the order and safety that the Consortium has worked tirelessly to establish. Sympathy for their plight, while human, can be a dangerous sentiment in our line of duty. Lieutenant Vega's gaze lingers on the class, ensuring her message has been fully absorbed. Consider the citizens living on the edge of the city, she begins, her tone shifting to address a new facet of this complex issue. Their perspective is unique, shaped by their proximity to the outcasts, yet they remain under the Consortium's jurisdiction. This duality in their existence often breeds a variety of sentiments. I lean forward, intrigued. It's a world I've caught glimpses of, where everything's blurry and nothing's for sure. Some of these citizens, Vega continues, may sympathize with the outcasts. They witness their struggles, understand their plight. This empathy can be a breeding ground for dissent. Her words echo in the room, a clear admonition of the dangers of empathy turning into allegiance against the Consortium. On the other hand, she adds, there are those who fear or resent the outcasts. They see them as a threat to the stability and safety we've worked so hard to establish. Vega's voice is firm, underscoring the precarious balance on the city's fringes. The classroom is silent, each trainee lost in thought. I find myself pondering the thin line between empathy and duty. How does one navigate this complex terrain where understanding and allegiance collide? Lieutenant Vega stands poised at the front of the room. In your duties, you will need to discern carefully, she advises, her voice carrying a note of solemnity. Not everyone living on the edge of the city aligns with the outcasts. Many are just regular citizens, trying to make the best of their circumstances. The room is still, the gravity of her words settling over us. She emphasizes the delicate task we will face in distinguishing between those who merely reside at the city's fringes and those who actively sympathize with the outcasts. It's a fine line, Vega continues, and one that you must navigate with both caution and insight. The safety of the citizens is your responsibility. They are under our protection, and it is our duty to ensure their well-being, even as we remain vigilant against potential threats. I absorb her words, feeling the weight of the responsibility she describes. How do we balance suspicion with empathy? How do we protect without alienating those we are meant to serve? Well, Lieutenant Vega continues, her eyes locking with each of ours in turn, the outcasts have chosen their path, but many citizens on the city's edge have not. It's our role to protect and maintain order, and this includes understanding the nuances of life in these areas. Your judgment in these matters must be astute and informed. She concludes, "Let me be clear," she begins, her voice resonating with a firm resolve. The outcasts, for the most part, are rebels and have chosen to live outside our societal norms. They are dangerous and opposed to the Consortium's principles. The room is filled with a silence, each trainee hanging on to her every word, understanding the gravity of what she's imparting. But, she points out one more time, not everyone living in the outer suburbs falls into this category. Many are ordinary citizens with lower incomes, residing at the edges of our city, simply trying to live their lives despite economic hardships. They are under our protection. Her eyes scan the room, ensuring her message is understood. Your duty will involve making crucial distinctions. You must be able to identify those who are among the citizen sympathizers of the outcasts, individuals who, while not outcasts themselves, may still pose a risk due to their allegiances. They can be just as dangerous as the rebels themselves. As Lieutenant Vega concludes her summary, I feel a sense of clarity mixed with apprehension. The distinctions she speaks of aren't just operational, they're moral and ethical decisions that we'll have to make. The line between a rebel, a sympathizer, and an ordinary citizen could be thin and blurred, and the consequences of our judgments could be profound. Sympathy, a dangerous sentiment? I ponder over these words. Can compassion truly be a liability in a world that prides itself on order and control? My gaze drifts to the window, where the city stretches out in orderly grids and patterns. Beyond it, hidden in the hazy edges, lies a world I've glimpsed but never truly known. As the lesson concludes and my classmates begin to file out of the room, I remain seated, lost in thought. The sympathizers, with their double existence, have become more than a distant concept to me. They are a reminder of the complexities and shades of gray that lie beneath the surface of our structured world. A reminder that even in a world of order, there are stories waiting to be heard, voices longing to be acknowledged. I lose my train of thought as I feel someone staring holes into me. Turning, my eyes meet Jack's at the room's rear. He sits there, his face an enigma, yet his eyes burn with a certain intensity that's hard to shake off. In that moment, the whispers about Jack come flooding back, tales of his supposed escapades in the underground's illicit fights. I tear my gaze away, yet the question hangs in the air, unshakable. Could there be a shred of truth in those rumors? Is Jack, with his aloof and mysterious air, entangled in the murky world that Lieutenant Vega so vehemently denounces? But I quickly push these thoughts aside. The Academy's rigorous background checks would never have allowed him as a trainee if there was any validity to those claims. The late afternoon finds us in the training room, a space marked by the sounds of grunts, thuds, and the occasional shout. It's a group session on defense techniques, and Corporal Miles is at the helm, his demeanor a blend of sternness and precision. Focus on the fundamentals, Miles instructs. Observation, reaction, and control. That's the key to effective self-defense. I pair up with Clara, grateful for her presence. The session is about learning the basics: how to read an aggressor's movements, how to block and deflect blows, and how to use the opponent's momentum against them. For someone like me, who's more accustomed to academic challenges than physical confrontations, it's all new and somewhat overwhelming. Clara is a pillar of patience, guiding me through each drill. Gradually, I'm getting better, the initial clumsiness fading into a growing, albeit careful, confidence. I'm hopeful that the sessions with Jack will further solidify my skills, though I can't shake off a slight apprehension about training with him again. The careful guidance and patience Clara is showing me now is comforting, a stark contrast to the intense and unpredictable nature of Jack's training methods. Speaking of Jack, my attention is momentarily diverted as a commotion erupts on one of the mats. Jack's training session has taken a turn. He has his sparring partner in a choking hold, the intensity in his eyes unnerving. The room falls silent as the trainee struggles and then goes limp, unconscious. Corporal Miles is quick to intervene, his voice sharp with disapproval. Calderon, release him now. Jack obliges, releasing his grip. His opponent's body collapses to the ground, falling in a limp heap. Jack's response is unsettlingly nonchalant. He didn't tap out, he says coolly, as if that justifies his excessive force. Miles reprimands him, but Jack's demeanor remains unchanged, unapologetic. It's a side of him that's both alarming and confusing. His skill is undeniable, but so is the coldness in his approach. As the session continues, Clara leans in closer to me, her eyes still fixed on where Jack had been standing moments ago. She shakes her head, a mix of disbelief and concern etched on her face. This man is supposed to train you? Clara asks, her tone laced with skepticism. I give a hesitant nod, a knot of discomfort forming in my stomach. Yes, I start grappling to justify my choice. He's the solution for a tough situation. Extreme problems need extreme solutions, don't they? Clara's frown deepens. Eva, be careful. There's a fine line between training hard and reckless endangerment. What he did today. She pauses, searching for the right words. It's not just about physical strength or skill. There's a responsibility that comes with it. Her words resonate with me, echoing my own concerns. Jack's capabilities are undeniable, but today's incident has highlighted a potentially dangerous side to his training methods. I know, I reply, my voice tinged with doubt. I'll be cautious. I need to get better. The incident leaves me rattled. I find myself stealing glances at Jack, trying to make sense of his actions. There's an edge to him, a boundary he seems all too willing to cross. The rest of the training session passes in a blur. While I appreciate the new knowledge and skills I'm acquiring, the image of Jack's unyielding grip and his detached justification linger in my mind. At 5 p.m. I enter the computer room, a space usually buzzing with the activity of other trainees, now deserted and silent except for the hum of the ventilation system. The single computer screen lit casts a pale glow in the dim room. It is here, in this secluded quadrant of the academy, that I re-engage with my scientific essence, where the variables of control and self-identity align most harmoniously. Jack's arrival, occurring shortly thereafter, infuses the space with a restrained yet palpable intensity. He positions himself next to me, a proximity so tangible that I can almost feel the warmth radiating from his body. This unexpected closeness, though distracting, is not entirely unwelcome. Caught in this shared space, I find myself engulfed in a whirlwind of confusion, frustrated by my own inability to focus, annoyed at being distracted without apparent purpose. I dive into the session, my enthusiasm clear as I rapidly explain, firewalls are protective barriers meant to block unauthorized access, but each has its weaknesses, its small doors to be found. Jack's intense stare turns to focused interest. This goes beyond basic understanding, I continue, fingers flying over the keyboard to display a network topology. Firewalls operate on ACLs, intricate but not perfect. Our goal is to find security gaps in these rules. I turn to Jack, simplifying the technicalities. Think of it as a cryptographic challenge. Firewalls use packet filtering and stateful inspection, scrutinizing data based on protocols and IP addresses. Our battlefield lies within these packets and rules. I launch a network scanner. We start with port scanning, identifying open ports and services, a recon mission. Unusual open ports or unpatched services can indicate vulnerabilities. Next, I run a vulnerability scanner. Tools like Vesta probe for known weaknesses, outdated software, missing patches. It's about finding the right door. Jack leans in, starting to understand. When we spot an exploit, we tailor our attack, crafting a payload to bypass firewall rules, maybe even escalate privileges for higher access. Jack's hands dance over the keyboard as he tries my hacking techniques. He, for his part, is a quick study. His questions are sharp, his understanding of the concepts growing with each explanation I offer. The session becomes a dance of sorts, me leading, him following, but with each step, his confidence grows. In our training environment, Jack's the clear master, but in the world of cybersecurity, the tables turn. Here, I hold the upper hand with my knowledge. Yet, Jack picks up things swiftly, and I find myself feeling a hint of jealousy. I don't grasp physical training as quickly as he grasps theory, and my fitness doesn't improve at the same rate as his understanding of cyber concepts. In a mix of frustration and a desire to level the playing field, I steer him towards a complex firewall, a slice of high-level geek territory that's probably overkill for our session. But maybe, I think, seeing him struggle like I do in physical training might feel satisfying. But as Jack grapples with the firewall I've set up, the Fortress Quantum, equipped with a sophisticated quantum key distribution mechanism, his initial curiosity morphs into frustration. He's focused, his brows knitted in concentration, yet each attempt to breach the digital fortress ends in failure. Watching him, I start feeling uneasy. His frustration is tangible, a far cry from his usual composed self. His fingers tap rapidly and impatiently on the keyboard, a departure from his characteristic self-control. The atmosphere in the room changes, becoming tense with Jack's growing annoyance. A faint sense of fear trickles into my thoughts, a reaction to his escalating tension. His eyes, hard and focused on the screen, betray the irritation simmering just below the surface. Each failure sharpens his frustration. He's usually cool, collected. Not now. The room feels smaller, charged with his growing irritation. I watch, tense. The air is thick, heavy with unspoken threats. His eyes, hard and relentless, don't leave the screen. My once clever plan suddenly feels like a mistake. He's a ticking bomb, and I've lit the fuse. I have to defuse it. Here, let me show you. Remember, qubits can be in several states at once because of superposition. It's crucial, I say quickly, cutting through the thick air of his frustration. I lean over, hovering just above the keyboard, guiding him through the code's complexity. Jack's demeanor slowly shifts as he listens, the edge of frustration gradually subsiding as understanding begins to take its place. He follows my guidance, his movements becoming more deliberate, more controlled. As we conclude the session, the undercurrent of fear that had surreptitiously climbed up my spine begins to ebb away, its icy tendrils loosening their grip. Ah, the joys of relaxation. Note to self, avoid poking the bear, aka Jack, unless I fancy becoming a headline in the tragic tech mishaps section. Juggling hand grenades, bad idea, I mentally quip, adding a mental eye roll for good measure. Especially when Jack's around, who's basically a walking, talking embodiment of handle with care, or face the fireworks. As the night creeps in, everyone else heads off to chill in their rooms or hang out in the courtyard. I find myself walking towards the gym for another session with Jack. The gym is unusually quiet. As I enter, I find it empty, save for Jack. The absence of the usual cacophony of weights and machinery leaves the space feeling almost serene, if not for the palpable intensity that Jack brings with him. Our session tonight is focused on strength training. It's a relentless series of push-ups and abdominal exercises. I struggle to keep up, my muscles burning with the effort. Each time I collapse on the gym mat, exhausted, it takes every ounce of my willpower to push myself back up. Jack glides through the exercises, his movements a study in controlled, almost mechanical grace. Shirtless, he's undeniably magnetic, each muscle sculpted and defined. As he moves, his muscles play a seductive dance of flexing and relaxing, an exhibition of raw strength and disciplined power. It's more than just physical fitness, it's an alluring display of masculine beauty that captivates me entirely. I watch, entranced, as every ripple and contour of his body tells a story of dedication and strength, igniting a flame of desire within me that is hard to dismiss. I'm secretly thankful for this distraction, this magnetic allure of his form, as it pulls my attention away from my own struggles with the exercise. With utter professional focus, Jack guides me through the workout, his firm hands adjusting the position of my arms, my back, and my legs. His fingers trace precise paths, lingering on my body with technical gestures. Although his intent is purely instructional, each touch is an unexpected distraction, an unintentionally intoxicating sensation that makes the exercise ironically more enjoyable for me. When we switch to abs workouts, I can't help but notice a scar on his stomach, an old wound that looks like it came from a stabbing. It's a jarring sight, a stark reminder of the life he might have lived outside the academy walls. The scar speaks of a history of violence, of survival. There's a story there, hidden beneath the surface of his disciplined exterior. A story that's likely as harsh as the scar itself. As we continue our grueling workout in the silent gym, another detail on Jack's body catches my eye, adding yet another layer to the enigma that surrounds him. On the inner side of his bicep, partially obscured by the constant movement, is a tattoo, a sequence of numbers inked into his skin. The numbers are just visible enough for me to make out, but their meaning is unclear. Is it a date, a code, or something more personal? The ink on his skin is a silent marker of a story, a piece of his history etched into his being. Right now, I concentrate wrestling every ounce of air into my stubborn lungs, with none to waste on idle chit-chat. I need to build strength, or at the very least, survive the attempt without making it too obvious that I'm internally debating the choices that brought me here. Every muscle in my body screams in protest from the relentless exertion, but I grit my teeth and persist. I will not give up. With determined resolve, I keep pushing forward, telling myself it will get easier with time. I'm certain of it. As our training session winds down, Jack's voice, previously used only to issue crisp commands for the next exercise, takes on a different tone. "You planning to continue with this tomorrow?" Jack asks, his gaze fixed on me, a hint of puzzlement in his eyes. I pause for a moment, feeling every ache in my body, yet there's a part of me that thrives on this challenge. With a wry smile, I reply, "Well, the sadistic part of me actually finds pleasure in it." Jack's expression subtly changes, his eyes darkening slightly. "Sadistic, huh?" he remarks. A slight grin briefly crosses his face. It vanishes almost as quickly as it appeared, leaving me to question if I really saw it. The idea that my pain might amuse him is unsettling. Is there a darker facet to Jack, something beneath that disciplined exterior that takes pleasure in this? Despite these thoughts, I force a light laugh, trying to keep the atmosphere from turning too serious. Yeah, who knew I had it in me? But don't expect me to go easy on you during the hacking sessions. Fair enough, Jack nods. Then 6 a.m. tomorrow for another run in the woods. I offer a nod, a small, controlled gesture that belies the tumult of emotions roiling beneath my calm exterior. It's a carefully constructed facade, one that masks the swirling cocktail of dread and pain that grips me internally. The very thought of enduring this again tomorrow sends a shiver down my spine. My body cries out for rest, for a respite from the relentless challenge it's being subjected to. I need time to recover, to gather the fragments of my strength scattered by today's exertions. But the daunting prospect of repeating this ordeal looms large, an ominous shadow over my weary spirit. As the night deepens and the academy grounds fall into a hushed stillness, I find myself lying in my bed, my body still reverberating with the day's physical demands. My thoughts, however, are consumed not by the aches in my muscles, but by the complex whirlwind that is Jack. The memory of him guiding me through the exercises in the gym lingers in my thoughts, more vivid than I care to admit. The feel of his hands, firm and demanding, positioning me just right, still tingles on my skin. His shirtless form, a blend of lean muscle and smooth skin, each movement precise and controlled, is etched in my mind like a living sculpture. Fuck! It's absurd, I scold myself, fighting to suppress these distracting sensations that threaten to blur the lines of focus. But it's not just the physical aspect of Jack that occupies my thoughts, it's the glimpses of darkness I've seen in him. The cold, detached way he handled our training, the fleeting amusement at my pain, the enigmatic tattoo and scar, all these elements paint a picture of a man who carries with him a history of violence and survival. In just a week, time has raced by in a whirlwind of non-stop training and tough new stuff. There's no room for rest in my regimen. Day by day, following Jack's rigorous schedule, I'm making progress, bit by bit. Those morning runs, which once felt like impossible feats, are getting easier. My body, despite the persistent aches, is evolving, growing more flexible, more resilient. The big test comes during parkour's training with Corporal Miles, keeping a close watch. The course, a tough blend of endurance and agility, challenges every improvement I've made. Moving through it, I feel the impact of those intense sessions with Jack. My actions are faster, surer, and I'm tackling obstacles that were once beyond me. Sergeant Knox, often a silent observer, keeps his usual stoic front, but I catch a hint of approval in his eyes as I finish the course. It's not a huge deal, but it means a lot in my progress. Corporal Miles, clearly showing he's impressed, is a sharp contrast to Knox's more subtle praise. "Well done, Voss," he bellows, his voice betraying unmistakable admiration. "Your progress is remarkable. Keep it up." That praise from Miles gives me a real confidence boost. Being acknowledged for the hard work and the strides I've made is profoundly satisfying. Jack, who has been observing from a distance, gives no outward sign of approval, but I sense a shift in our dynamic. There's a grudging admiration that has begun to form between us, unspoken but palpable. His training methods, unorthodox and demanding as they are, have proven effective. After completing the parcours, I take a moment to catch my breath, feeling a mix of exhaustion and triumph. That's when Jack approaches me, his expression unreadable as always. "You're getting better," he states matter-of-factly, his eyes scanning the obstacle course I've just conquered. "But we need to up the game, combat techniques starting this evening." His directness is jarring but not unexpected. "The challenges start next week," he continues, his tone serious. "You're improving, but you're not ready for what's coming. You'll get your ass kicked again if we don't push harder." His blunt assessment stings, but I know he's right. Despite my improvements, I'm still lagging behind in combat skills. A fact that Jack, in his characteristic unflinching manner, makes clear. I nod, getting ready for the next round of torture. "I understand," I reply, determination firming my voice. "I'm ready to learn. What time tonight?" Jack seems to appraise my resolve for a moment before answering. "Meet me at the combat area at 9 p.m. Be prepared for an intensive session." As he walks off, I feel pumped up but also nervous about what's next. I know the coming sessions will be demanding, possibly even more grueling than what I've already experienced. But I also know they're necessary. I'm not just training to get better, I'm training to survive the challenges ahead. With Jack's guidance, difficult as it may be, I'm forging myself into a stronger, more capable version of myself. The path ahead is daunting, but I'm committed to walking it, every challenging step of the way. As the day wanes into evening, the weight of anticipation settles heavily upon me. The thought of the impending combat training with Jack sends a mix of apprehension and determination coursing through my veins. My muscles, still sore from the relentless regimen of running and strength training, protest at the prospect of more exertion. Approaching the sparring area, I see Jack already there, waiting. His presence is commanding, an unspoken challenge hanging in the air around him. The knowledge of what's to come, the close, ruthless contact on the mat, sends a jolt of panic up my spine, but I refuse to let it show. Squaring my shoulders, still aching from the day's workouts, I lift my chin in a silent display of defiance. I won't let my apprehensions be visible, not to Jack, not to anyone. My steps are measured, each one an effort to project strength rather than reveal the fatigue that clings to my limbs. Jack watches as I approach, his dark eyes unreadable. It's impossible to tell what he's thinking, whether he doubts my readiness or silently appraises my determination. At this moment, as I step into the sparring area, I realize that this is more than just a training session. It's a test of wills, a measure of how far I'm willing to push myself. As I stand in there, trying to mask my apprehension, Jack begins to instruct me. His voice is firm, his instructions clear and concise. "Speed is your advantage," he states, his eyes assessing my stance. "You need to strike first and strike hard. Don't give your opponent a chance to counter." He demonstrates, showing me how to target vulnerable areas, the knees, throat, and groin. "These are your targets. It's about being efficient and precise. Put everything into it." I listen intently, absorbing his instructions. The idea of striking these sensitive areas is daunting, and a sense of reluctance washes over me. The thought of inflicting pain, even in a training scenario, is unsettling. Jack seems to sense my hesitation. "You need to do this," he urges. "It's not just about technique, it's about mindset. You have to be willing to do what's necessary." He stands in front of me, positioning himself as my practice target. "Try it on me," he says, a challenge in his tone. I hesitate, my hands clenching and unclenching at my sides. The thought of taking a swing at Jack feels about as wise as arm wrestling a grizzly bear. I attempt a swift kick aimed at Jack's stomach. In a flash, he catches my leg, using my momentum against me and throwing me to the mat with an effortless motion. I hit the ground hard, my breath escaping in a sharp exhale. Jack stands over me, a hint of a smirk on his face. "Didn't hear me, or don't know a man's anatomy? I'd bet on the latter," he taunts, his words sharp, calculated to incite. His remark ignites a fire in me, a blend of embarrassment and anger. I scramble to my feet, my gaze locked on his. "I heard you just fine," I snap back, my voice laced with irritation. Jack's expression doesn't change, but there's a glint in his eyes. He's pushing me, testing me. Then prove it, and quit wasting my time, he challenges, his stance inviting another attempt. This time, my approach is different. His taunt has sharpened my focus. I feign another high kick, but at the last moment change my trajectory, aiming for a more vulnerable spot. Jack anticipates the move with ease, blocking it effortlessly. A hint of an appreciative smile plays on his lips, acknowledging my attempt to adapt. Better, he comments, but still predictable. Challenged, I quickly regain my stance, not allowing the setback to deter me. In a split-second decision, I launch a quick jab aimed at his throat, a move I hope will catch him off guard. But Jack's reflexes are too quick. He grips my arm mid-strike and with a fluid motion, pulls me over his side. I'm airborne for a fleeting moment, the sensation of weightlessness overtaking me before I crash onto the mat. The impact forces the air out of my lungs in a sharp, painful whoosh. Lying on the mat, I struggle to catch my breath, the shock of the fall momentarily disorienting me. Jack stands over me, his expression a mix of sternness and a faint trace of respect. You're learning, but you have to think ahead, he advises, offering a hand to help me up. Anticipate the counter, not just the strike. I accept his hand, pulling myself to my feet. His words resonate with me, a reminder that combat is as much about strategy as it is about physical ability. Each move, each decision is a part of a larger chess game. Gathering my resolve, I prepare for my next move. Jack stands before me, a picture of calm readiness, his hands loose at his sides. There's an air of confidence about him, an unspoken challenge in his relaxed stance. I lunge forward with a punch, aiming to capitalize on what appears to be an opening. But it's a feint, a trap he's laid out effortlessly. In an instant, he counters, grabbing my arm and twisting it into a submission hold to the ground. A wave of nausea hits me, not just from the pain, but from the close proximity to him. His thighs pin me to the ground, his legs effectively trapping mine. The heat from our bodies mingles, an unwanted distraction amidst the struggle. My body reacts, not just with the effort of the fight, but with other, more confusing sensations. My mind becomes a haze of pain, effort, and something else, something I can't afford to focus on now. I'm immobilized, the reality of my physical limitations glaringly apparent. Jack's control over the situation is absolute, his training and experience overshadowing my still developing skills. The tightness of his hold leaves me barely able to move, every attempt to free myself only tightening his grip. In the midst of our intense session, pinned and struggling beneath Jack, I feel a mixture of frustration and helplessness. Noticing my struggle, Jack pauses momentarily, and his tone shifts from that of a challenger to an instructor. "Listen," he says, his voice firm but instructive. "Don't just fight against the hold. That's what your opponent expects. You need to think tactically." He explains the technique to break free from his hold, guiding me through the motions. Shift your weight, use your opponent's strength against them. It's about leverage, not just brute force. Taking in his advice, I refocus my efforts. This time, instead of simply struggling against his grip, I use the momentum of my movement, combined with a strategic shift of my weight, to create an opening. With this new approach, I feel Jack's hold loosen. Seizing the moment, I manage to twist and turn out of his grip, effectively freeing myself. Sitting up, I take a moment to catch my breath, a mix of relief and triumph coursing through me. Jack nods in approval, a rare acknowledgement from him. "That's it. Remember, in combat, it's as much about outthinking your opponent as it is about physical strength." As I stand up, catching my breath, there's an undeniable sense of pride swelling within me. Despite knowing that Jack is holding back, tempering his strength to match my level, the fact that I managed to free myself is a personal victory. It's a testament to my growing skill and adaptability, a sign that I'm learning. In the midst of this sense of accomplishment, a restless feeling persists. The close contact in training, the way his body pinned mine to the mat, sparked a confusing whirl of sensations within me. His nearness, the intense feel of him, it's overwhelming, too close, too much for just a training session. I can feel the heat in my cheeks, a blush that might be from the exertion, the embarrassment, or perhaps something else entirely. The boundaries between professional training and personal space have blurred, leaving me flustered and unsure. Distancing myself from Jack, I try to shake off the unsettling feelings. I focus on the physical sensations, the rapid beating of my heart, the deep breaths filling my lungs, anything to distract from the confusing thoughts swirling in my mind. Thankfully, Jack signals the end of the session, laying out plans for the next. "Tomorrow night, we'll work on your kicks. You need more power there," he states, hinting at a lengthy road ahead. As he pauses at the door, turning around with that suggestive smirk, he drops a line that throws me off balance. "Sweet dreams, Eva, and let your imagination escape," he says with a mischievous wink. Is he reading my thoughts? The hidden meaning in his words hits me. He's hinting at the effect he has on me, the tension that arises from our inevitable closeness on the mat. Am I that obvious? His openness about something so personal shocks me. His words make me flush with heat. He's aware of his effect on me, and that's unsettling. And now, he's toying with me, and it's clear he enjoys it. As I lie in my bed, the events of the day replay in my mind like a vivid, unending montage. My body aches from the rigorous training, each muscle protesting with a dull, persistent soreness. But it's not just the physical exhaustion that weighs on me. My thoughts are a tumultuous sea, stirred by the day's intense experiences. The room is quiet, the only sound being my own steady breathing. The stillness of the night should be calming, yet my mind refuses to settle. Instead, it drifts, wandering into territories I don't want to explore, fueled by the adrenaline of the day's training and Jack's provocative parting words. My imagination takes flight, crafting wild fantasies that both thrill and unsettle me. Scenes from the training session resurface, the feeling of Jack's body pinning mine, the intensity of our sparring, the arousing physical closeness. I'm furious, not just with him, but with myself for being caught up in this mess, for feeling whatever this maddening mix of emotions is. It's all nonsense, a distraction I can't afford. Yet here I'm, tangled in a web of feelings that make no sense, wrestling with anger and an inexplicable draw towards him. It's all just bullshit. I try to push these thoughts away, to focus on the practical aspects of the training, on the skills I'm developing, but it's a futile effort, so fuck it. The physical exertion of combat training melt into my body physical desire, so I let it. As I start to fall asleep, the boundaries between the waking world and the realm of dreams blur into an indistinct haze. In this twilight state of consciousness, the sensations of the day, my body's wariness, the rush of adrenaline, the fleeting touches, meld into a vivid, almost tangible tapestry of dreams. The scene is engulfed in a hurricane of emotion and sensation, where fear and exhilaration are inextricably linked, a passionate dance of desire and longing. In the embrace of these dreams, our bodies, bared by the intensity of training, seek each other with a raw, desperate need. They move together, following a rhythm that escalates, becomes fiercer, an entanglement of flesh and sensation that transports me to the heights of ecstasy.